Boys and girls, before we get started on our project, let's take a second to talk about the elements of art that we will utilize in this work of art. So we're going to be focusing on line and shape. So I want you to take a look at the examples that I have on here of line and shape and just keep that in your mind as we start our project. Remember, the elements of art are like the ingredients in an artwork. We're also going to look at the principles of design that we will be using as well. And you want to think of the principles of design as the recipe, how you're using those ingredients. So in this project, we're going to be focusing on pattern, which is a repetition of line and shapes. Okay, perfect. Now that you know what we're going to be focusing on, let's get started. All right, boys and girls, welcome to one of our at-home art lessons. Today, the project that we're going to be doing is a name Scramble Zentangle project. I know that sounds like a lot of words, but basically what we're going to be doing is writing our name in block letters, going all different kinds of directions. And then in the shapes that our name creates, we're going to be creating Zentangles, which is essentially just a repeated pattern, which that's what a pattern is. It is lines or shapes that repeat. So to get started, we are going to be using a pencil, a black marker, water-based markers, a paintbrush, water, and a paper towel. Like I said in my intro video, if you do not have a paintbrush at home, don't worry. Just go through the steps with what you have at home and be creative with what you create. So to get started, I'm going to be using a pen, but I want you to be using a pencil. I'm using a pen because I want you to see what I'm drawing, but I want you to use a pencil. That way you're able to erase. So I'm going to start by drawing an M pretty big. I'm going to start at the edge of my paper. I'm going to go all the way up to create an M. And we want to make the letters really big and we want them to touch the edge of the paper because we are going to be creating patterns in the shapes that our letters create. So if you just do it really small in the middle of your paper, you're not going to create those shapes. So then I'm going to start with the R for misses, but I don't want to just go in a straight line. I want to create some variety and interest. So I'm going to make my R kind of be sideways and I'm going to have it connect right here. Now, if it helps you to turn your paper, you can definitely do that. And then I'm going to draw my S and I'm going to have it connect like that. Perfect. Okay. So right now I have misses, and as you can see in the negative space, it's created these shapes that we will utilize during the next part of our project. So now I'm gonna use this bottom portion to create Wade, and your name is unique. So think about how many letters are in your name and think about a unique way that you can organize them on the paper. Okay, so I just created my W. I'm gonna, again, create some interest like I did with my R, and I'm gonna create my A. And then I'm gonna create my D, go all the way down, make this really big. And then I'm gonna make my E go sideways. Okay, and again, like I said, I'm using a pen so that you can see what I'm doing, but you're gonna be using a pencil. That way, if you create something that you don't like, you can erase it. So once you get your letters on your paper in a way that you like, I want you to then turn them into block letters. So to do that, you are going to create parallel lines. Parallel lines mean they're going in the same direction. So I'm gonna draw a parallel line up here, down here, to create a thickness to our letters, okay? And we're gonna end up coloring all these in black. So if your lines overlap a little bit, like I'll show you with this R, you can see I have this connecting line. That is totally okay, because like I said, after this, we're gonna spend some time coloring it in black. Okay, so for my S, I'm gonna keep adding parallel lines to create a thickness. And I'm gonna keep doing that for all the rest of my letters. Okay, so now that I have my letters outlined, I want you to notice how I've created shapes. Shapes are made up of lines that are enclosed. So I have a bunch of these little shapes. Like I said, if you made your letters really small, you would not have a lot of individual shapes. So keep that in mind when you're making your composition. So now I'm gonna take this permanent marker. If you don't have a permanent marker, use any black marker that you have, and I'm gonna start coloring in my letters. Okay, so now that I have all my letters colored in, I am going to do a little bit of a trick with markers. Now, your markers have to be water-based. So if you have Crayola washable markers, then you're good. Just make sure that it's not permanent marker, because we're going to be turning these markers into paint by adding water. But again, if you don't have water, then just do the marker part and it will still turn out great. So I'm going to take my markers and I'm going to pick colors for each of these individual shapes. And I'm going to outline around the shape with a pretty thick line. So I'm going to take some time and do that now. All of these individual shapes are outlined with a color. I want you to notice how I was using the side of my marker to do that, and that I've created pretty thick lines by using the side. I didn't just draw a thin line with the tip. So from here, if you don't have a paintbrush and a cup of water, then for now you can leave it like this. But if you do have a paintbrush and water, I want us to activate the marker and it'll turn into kind of like a watercolor. So you're gonna dip your brush in the water and you're going to put the brush on the outside of the paint and it's gonna wake it up. And then you're gonna start dragging the ink towards the middle of that shape. And it'll be darker along the edge and then it'll slowly gradate and start getting a little bit lighter as you get to the middle. And that's why it's important that those lines were nice and thick, especially for some of these bigger shapes, so that the ink gets to the middle. So I'm gonna start and I'm gonna do all my violet sections first. That way I don't have to wash my brush as much. So I'm gonna do all the sections that are violet. Oops, got a little dab there, but that's totally fine. I'm gonna activate it and just kind of take that off real quick. Perfect. Okay, so now that I have my violet, I'm going to wash my brush off and put it on this napkin. And since I spilled a little bit on the blue, I'm gonna go ahead and do my blue spaces. Perfect. Okay, and I'm going to continue doing that until all the spaces are colored. Beautiful. So I love how marker can be turned into paint just by adding water. So we're gonna take some time to let this dry before we come back and finish our masterpiece. Okay, boys and girls, now that our marker has dried, I want you to grab a black pen, or if you have a marker, basically you just need something black to then add some Zentangle patterns to our different shapes. So each different color, I want you to do a different pattern. Now, patterns, like I said before, are repeating lines and shapes. So for example, in this purple, I'm going to start by drawing a wavy line, and I'm going to keep repeating that wavy line. And I'm going to do that until it fills the whole space. Now, in some instances, you'll see I'm hitting the black outline. So I'm just going to pretend like I'm still going and then continue it. And I'm going to finish out this space, and then I'm going to move to my other ones. Space with a Zentangle pattern. So now I'm going to take some time and I'm going to do the rest of my shapes. You can do any pattern that you want. If you want some ideas, if you just do a Google search for Zentangle, that's Zentangle, you'll find lots of different pattern ideas that might give you some inspiration. But from now on, I'm going to finish out my patterns.